Miss Starr, what is your birth name? What's on your birth certificate? May 16, 1983. Your birth name? Oh, Kelly Jeffries. Did you legally change your name to Kelly Starr? I was married. I'm sorry? I was married. It changed from Jeffries to Starr when you got married? Yes. And at some point, did you change it to home? I was married again. You've been married twice? Yes. Now, Miss Jeffries, Miss Starr, you were convicted of your first felony back in 2001, correct? Yes, I believe so. And you were 17 at the time? Yes. Okay. And that was, you had a common law robbery? Yes. Uttering a forged instrument? Yes. Forgery of instruments? Yes. Larceny? Yes. And felony breaking and entering? Yes. And you were placed on probation? Yes. And at some point in 2002, you picked up another forgery instrument, right? I guess so. I don't know the dates. In Lincoln County, does that sound right? Yes. And that violated your probation? Yeah. Did you? Did you go to prison? I did. How much time did you serve? A year. Okay, and you also had a felony fleeing to elude in 2002, correct? Yes. And felony possession of stolen goods, both of those in Gaston County? I guess so, if that's what it says on my record. And in 2006, convicted of a false police report in Gaston County, yes or no? Yeah, if that's what it says. And then in 2009, you were convicted of 3 counts of identity fraud. Yes. 2 counts of larceny? Yes. Obtaining property under false pretense? Yes. And uttering a forged instrument? Yes. And one of those charges, your mother was the victim, correct? Yes. You used her credit card? Yes. Without telling her? Correct. And you bought some items? Yes. And you also had an ID with your picture on it with her name? Correct. And you cashed her income tax check, correct? Correct. You also was charged with pawning her TV? Correct. And you pawned her lawnmower, correct? Correct. And you also used your sister's ID, correct? Correct. And you were placed on probation for those matters? Yes. And you mentioned that you were part of, I believe you said it was 4 different gangs? 4 sets. Excuse me? 4 different sets. I'm sorry? Yes. What was the first set that you were a part of? G-Shine. What year was that? 2008. And where was that set located? In Shelby. In Shelby? You were living in Shelby at that time? No, I lived in Cherryville. You lived in Cherryville. Okay. And so you've already been convicted of several crimes before you became a G-Shine member, correct? Correct. And prior to you becoming a G-Shine, were you working at that time? No, I received disability. Received disability. And how long were you a member of G-Shine? I'm not sure. A couple of years? 2 years? A year? 3 years? I don't know. Okay, and then after G-Shine, what set did you? I went to Pretty Tony. Pretty Tony? Yes. You don't remember when that was? I don't know the date, no, or the year. Okay, now the G-Shine set, were they sanctioned? G-Shine was. The set is sanctioned. Now the people that I were under were not really who they said they were. They didn't have the stain that they said they had. And did you have any stain within G-Shine? No, I did not. Okay, and Pretty Tony wasn't sanctioned either, correct? Pretty Tony was not sanctioned. Okay, never was? At one point. At some point they did get sanctioned under G-Shine. But now, are you saying, did you know at that time what was going on with Pretty Tony? No, I did not. Okay, and you don't know how long? You don't remember how long you were a part of Pretty Tony? I do not. And then after that, what were you? What set did you join then? I went to a Ricket Hunter. Was this all in Shelby? A Ricket Hunter was in New York. Pretty Tony, I met some online that was in prison, and that's how I became Pretty Tony. So were you a member of G-Shine and Pretty Tony at the same time? No, I was a member of G-Shine, and then I flipped to Pretty Tony. Okay, and then you flipped again? Correct. And then you said after that you were a member of Imperial? Yes. After a Ricket Hunter, I went to 9 Trey for a little bit. What's a little bit? It wasn't even, I don't know, 2 months. Were you with 9 Trey for 2 months? Yeah. And then I went to Imperial. Now I know in general some of the terms are different, but each 9 Trey and G-Shine, they have their own language. Isn't that correct? Not all the terms mean the same thing. Is that true? Correct. What year were you a part of 9 Trey? That was 2011 because that's the year that I got beat up. And you said you got beat up by some of the 9 Trey members? I sure did. Okay, and you also talked about an incident with Omega Reed? Yes. Was that while you were a member of 9 Trey? No. What were you a member of at that time? I wasn't, I was just blood. What year was that? 2011. 2011. Now, is it true that you have been accused of taking some money from Omar Reed? Yes. And isn't it true that you have been accused of setting him up to get robbed? Setting who up to get robbed? Omar Reed. How? He was in prison. From what years? Since I've known him. So I believe you testified that he set you up to get robbed. Yes. And he was in prison the entire time you knew him? Yes. And isn't it true that you're familiar with the term being put on the plate or food? Yes. And that just means that somebody is going to do something or supposed to do something to you, correct? Correct. Okay, and isn't it true that you at some point you were labeled food? Yes, I've been labeled food a lot. And that's based upon what you've been accused of doing, correct? Right. You've been accused of stealing kitty money, correct? No, kitty money? Yes. No. You also have been accused of lying on a member, is that true? Yes. And just basically stirring up controversy, correct? Correct. And this was all around 2011? Yeah. Okay, and you were assaulted by some 9 Trey members? Yes. You have been labeled as food. And when did you start officially working for the government? March of 2012. March of 2012. And at that point, you said you started doing some undercover buys? Yes. On down there. Okay, and you also cooperated with the government in regards to a previous trial, is that correct? Took place a couple of years ago. I wasn't part of that trial. But you were working for the government at that time, correct? Yes, but I wasn't part of that trial. So the members, the 9 Trey set that you were a part of, they were in where? Shelby? I know 9 Trey in Shelby, but I was under Omega. Omega was in prison. But you said you were a 9 Trey for 2 months. Yeah, I was under Omega. So can you explain what that means? That means I was Omega's little homie. Okay, so you weren't part of a set? Yeah, 9 Trey. Omega is the high. I was under his line of 9 Trey. But where was it? So there's no specific location, you're saying? Right. And you gave information. You've spoken to government several times since you've been cooperating, correct? Yes. And at some point, you were supposed to go see SI? SI asked me to come see him. Okay, but you never went? Correct. And that was around 2012? I don't know the time when it was. Okay, but you've given the government, sat down, talked to them, was debriefed by them, and told them basically everything you know, correct? Correct. And at no time in 2012 or 2013 or 2014 or even 2015 did you ever give the name James Braxton, did you? No, I did not. Okay, you didn't know him? No, I did not. Never talked to him? Correct. Never communicated with him? Right. In fact, they told you about him, correct? They gave me his name. They gave you his name. I knew a Frank White. He was on the lineup. I didn't know his government. You had seen his name before? Correct. Okay, but never communicated with them. Correct. And they came to you in October to make arrangements to go see him in New York State Prison. Correct. And to be clear, this was after S.I. was killed, correct? Correct. And you made arrangements to go up to New York to see him. Correct. And we heard I believe there was about 7 excerpts of the transcript with the wire that you wore. Correct. And those range from about 30 seconds to maybe a minute on some of them. Correct. But the meeting, when you went to see him, you were there for at least 4 hours, if not longer. Correct. Okay. And you all talked a lot while you were there. Correct. And I believe you went with your wife at the time. Correct. And you all spoke about a whole lot of things. Yes. Spoke about what you were doing. You spoke about you and her, about your wedding. Mm-hmm. Talked about school? Yes. Talked about religion. Talked about faith. All that stuff, correct? Yes. And he also read some poem that he had written, correct? He read out the Bible. Do you remember a poem he was talking about love? I don't remember that. Okay, and do you remember him talking about a resolution of conflict? About members, about how they should handle conflicts? Do you remember that? I don't remember. Okay, and you also took pictures? Yes. And overall, he embraced you, correct? Correct. And he basically told you about how much he cherishes brotherhood and them being together, correct? Correct. And you also expressed to him that there were some things that had happened to you, correct? Correct. And you basically was talking about that he didn't agree with that this is not how people should treat each other, correct? Yes. So there was a lot more to your visit than what we heard. Yes, there was. You also mentioned you sold drugs. Yes, I have. When was this? What year are we talking about? I sold drugs several times over the last couple of years. Did you sell before 2011? I don't think so. I'm not sure. Okay, you also mentioned that you took some drugs to different prisons. Yes, I did. Within North Carolina. And you tried 2 times that you did this. Were there other times that you did this that you didn't describe? I took drugs twice to New York. To where? To New York State Corrections. You said New York State? Yeah, New York. I've never took drugs inside of the prison in North Carolina. This is only in New York? Yes. And that was Capone that you said you were dating at the time? Yes. And you also said that you arranged a second visit to see James Baxton in March. Yes. And now, these visits, when you go to the FBI, they don't go with you, do they? No, they do not. They just give you the wire to wear. Yeah, they're in New York. They don't go inside the prison with me. But they don't even go to the facility with you? They're there in the vicinity. In the vicinity? Yes. And you said that I believe they didn't let you go into the facility with the wire? Right. You said they. Who are you referring to as they? The Department of Corrections. But you got in October? Yeah, but different people work at the front. Some have different rules than others. And I believe earlier you testified that you spent some of your own money to go up to New York? Yeah, that's before I became a source for the government. So you weren't referring to when you became a source? Correct. And you also, I believe the government asked you about you selling drugs on the side when you were supposed to be working for the government. Yes. How long? How long what? How long did you sell drugs on the side while you were working for the government? I don't know. Could you give me an estimate? Go on for years? Yes. Went on for years, you said? Yes. Okay, and you didn't tell them about it until you got confronted about it. Is that correct? I didn't tell them about it until 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was prepping for trial. 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this was after you had already been paid a total of $137,512.63. Yes. And in 2000, in September 22nd, 2016, You made an undercover purchase and you took $200 out of the $2,200 that you were paid. Yes. And you never told them about it until you were confronted with it. The next day? After they confronted you? Yes, the next day. Okay, and at the time you had already been paid over $12,000 from the government. Okay. Is that a yes or a no? Yes, I guess. I don't know how much it was at that time. Did you sell drugs to support yourself? Yeah, I have 5 kids. Okay, and so that was being support. That's how you paid your bills? Sometimes, yes. Okay, and in fact, I believe the government asked you about the crimes that you did. You commit crimes while you are a member of UBN. And the truth is, you committed these crimes to help pay your bills. Is that correct? Yes. To support yourself? Yes. Okay. And the money that you made from that, you paid dues, correct? Yeah, I paid dues with some of it, yes. Okay, and members aren't required to commit crimes. Isn't that true? They're not required to commit crimes, but yes or no? But you are required. Your Honor, can we let her finish the answer, please? Right. If you were trying to complete the answer, you may. They're not required to commit crimes, but they are required to pay dues. So if you have no money, then how else are you going to do it? But members do have jobs, correct? Some do. Okay. Some are felons like I am. Okay, I believe you were asked about, could I have Exhibit 25, page 9? You talked earlier about DP, correct? And you talked about members being beat for 31 seconds for not paying dues. Now, truth is, the first time you don't pay dues, you don't get beat. Isn't that true? Not the first time, no. Probably not the second time. Isn't that true? It depends. It depends? So you just give an example of what could happen to you? Right. And do you see down in the middle of the screen where it talks about, also we have a disciplinary learning thing we call 5 Love? Yes. Is that not something that's put in place for members that get in trouble? It is. And that's used. Isn't that true? Yeah, that's for not serious, breaking non-serious rules. Okay, but the point is, what you described is what happens. That's not the norm that happens all the time, is what I'm getting at. There's different ways that people are disciplined, correct? There can be, yes. Take it down. And the government asked you specifically about James Baxton's role, and your comment was, he is the acting godfather. Yes. And that's based upon what? Based upon the knowledge that we're given? Based upon the knowledge that you were given? Yes. Okay. And all of the documentation that went through, the Inglewood information, he wasn't listed as a godfather in any of that, was he? Yeah, S.I. died. I'm sorry? You're correct. That's old paperwork. S.I. died. That was before S.I. died. But to say he's the acting godfather, isn't that contrary to the letters that were presented? Towards the paperwork that was presented. The letters that were given to you, that you read. If he is an acting godfather, how does he have a high under him? Do you recall reading the letter that he basically turned it down? He turned down Magoo's spot. He didn't turn down the acting GF. So you're saying that when S.I. died, he automatically took over? Who took over? James Baxton. He had took over before S.I. died. Oh, so there were 3 godfathers then? No. S.I. had tried to kick Magoo out. Then S.I. died. It was S.I. and Frank White. Oh, so Magoo was no longer the godfather. From what was said. Okay. In fact, you were debriefed by the FBI. You sat down with them to tell them what they had wanted out of, or the purpose of the visit, when you went to go visit James Baxton, correct? Yeah, there were some questions that they wanted me to ask to supply answers to. There were also some questions when you went to visit Pedro Gutierrez, isn't that correct? Yes. And one of the questions that they wanted you to find out at that time in 2015, end of 2015, was what was James Baxton's role within the organization? Isn't that what they wanted you to find out? Yes. And you also, After you visited both James Baxton and Pedro Gutierrez, you sat down with the FBI that time and basically told them what you were told. Correct? Okay. And not one time did you tell them that James Baxton was acting godfather. Isn't that true? I'm not sure. Okay. You also mentioned you talked about DJ. Yes. Okay. Guns. I'm sorry? Guns. Now, did you hang out with him? I met him a couple of times. What's a couple of times? Like twice. When did you meet him? I went up there and picked him up and met him then. I had met him before that. Before I became a source, I had met him in Greenville, North Carolina. So you picked up Bianca? That was in 2016? I believe so, yes. Okay, and before you came a source, was in 2011? No, before then. Yeah. So you met him even before then? I'm not sure of the time or what day I met him, but I met him before then. I met him in Greenville. Okay, so you met him in Greenville sometime before 2011? Sometime before 2012, yes. Okay, and you met him when you went to go pick up Bianca? This time. And you left from Shelby? I left from Cherryville. You went from Cherryville to Greenville to pick up Bianca? No, it was a little town. I don't remember the name of the town that they were living in that I went and picked her up from. And then we drove to New York. Okay, you and her drove to New York? Yes. So you met him twice. You never bought drugs from him? No, I never bought drugs from him. Never sold drugs to him? No. And if I could have Exhibit 37. Is it, Miss Starr? You testified earlier that this was a kite that was given to you, correct? Yes. When you went to go see James Baxton? Yes. And you said this was for you to give to Magoo. Is that what you said? To Mikey. To Mikey? Yes. Okay, did you not testify on direct originally you were going to give it to Magoo? I'm not sure, but it was to Mikey. It was to go to Mikey? Yes. Isn't it true, Miss Starr, that was actually given to you for you to have? It was given to me? So you have, did anybody ask you about? No, it was about the visit? It was given to me to give to Mikey. And it starts out family? Yes. Okay, and it says right there, Mikey, stop the 7 hood shit. But it starts out family, and it says, it's hard for me to see this. And he basically says he's my brother for life, like you all are to family. Okay, correct? That's what it says there, yes. About, but it goes on to say, Mikey, stop the 7 hood shit. Where do you see stop? 1, 2, 3, 4th line in the middle. Mikey, stop with the 7 hood shit. In the bottom of that on the next page. And this is all on the same letter, correct? Yeah, on the same paper. On the same paper? Mm-hmm. Okay, that was given to me. So did he tell you to rip the paper up, to give one side to one, and you keep the other side? Yeah, I mean, that's how we do it. We give a piece of paper, you just write a kite on it. I've had papers this small. You say this. Like that small. Like just a small piece of paper. Like 4 inches? 5 inches? Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, you also talked about hard body, correct? Mm-hmm. And the truth is, Miss Starr, you really don't know what his position is, correct? Hard body was under Frank White. But you testified on direct, you didn't appear you were sure of what his position was, correct? I'm not sure of his name, no. You don't know his name? No. Did you know hard body? I never met hard body in person. I know of him. You know of him? Yes. Okay. And you and James Baxton, you all didn't speak about him on the visit, did you? No, we did not. And there was nothing on the wire about it, was there? I don't believe so. I'm not sure. If I can just have a moment, Your Honor. Can we play clip 30? It's Exhibit 31, clip number 4. Okay, now you said that. I believe you testified on direct that he was talking about SI? SI, Mikey, HR. But you said he was specifically talking about SI. Right here, where it says, the first baby blood right there. The first little brother of blood? Yes. Right there. Yeah, SI. Okay, but when he says, you know what I mean, and it's got that UI, do you see what I'm talking about? Unintelligible. Yes, he actually says a name there, doesn't he? I don't know, it's unintelligible. Can we play that? Play it again. He says his name's Sherm, doesn't he? I didn't hear Sherm. He says something? Okay, in the paperwork, that's not what the first little brother of blood means or who it was. In any paperwork that you read, in any knowledge, it says SI was the first little brother of blood, the youngest to ever be brought home. So you're basing your interpretation of this conversation off of paperwork. Is that what you're telling me? He's blood. I'm basing this conversation off of what we were talking about. He said SI, the first little brother of blood right there. But my question to you was on, I guess, I understand you don't know what he said, but he does say something, correct? Correct. And at the time, you didn't know what he meant or what he said at that time, and you still can't tell? I don't know what he said right there. Okay. I don't remember what he said at the time. Okay, that's fine. Okay. And the government also, they played one of the excerpts they played, and you said that we heard about the 20 and 25 grams of dog food. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. You didn't speak to James Baxton before this visit, correct? Correct. Okay. And throughout the other portions, the other 3 or 4 hours that you were there, you all didn't speak about drugs, correct? About this? We spoke about dog food right here. But I'm asking about aside from this. No, I don't believe so. Okay, and he didn't show you any drugs? No. You didn't see any drugs? No. Okay, and even after this conversation on that same day, nothing else was said about that? I don't believe so. Okay. And in fact, on the call, on the wire, excuse me, you all were laughing. Isn't that correct? Yes. And he also started laughing, correct? I believe so, yes. And did you say earlier that you testified that you had sold heroin in the past? No. I take heroin to the prison. You just took it to the prison? Yes. Okay. And the 2 times that you took it, do you remember how much you took? I took heroin 1 time, and I do not remember how much it was. And do you remember when you all had the conversation that we just talked? Do you remember him winking at you? No. You don't remember that? No. And aside from the excerpts from the wire conversation that we heard, the most of the time you all talked. You all really didn't talk about any type of 9 Trey or UBN or any type of blood business, did you? I really don't remember the whole wire. I don't know what we talked about, so I couldn't tell you what we talked about the rest of that time. You also earlier, you mentioned somebody named P-Banger. Yes. And you said he's no longer affiliated with blood? He's no longer 9 Trey. He's no longer 9 Trey? Yes. And where is he? He's in New York, or he was in New York. Do you know what happened to him? I know that SI told me that he kicked him out of the whip because he was the reason that SI went back to the feds the last time. SI kicked him out? Yes. As far as you know, nothing physically happened to him. No, not that I know of. Okay, and earlier you testified that basically blood in and blood out, correct? Yeah. As far as you know, P-Banger is still alive and nothing has happened to him? Yeah, he's not out of blood. He's just out of 9 Trey. And we also heard a conversation that they played with you and Pedro Gutierrez about HOTS, correct? Mm-hmm. And, yes, there was a jail call that we heard between you and James Baxton about that, correct? Yes. And he basically tried to have you intervene to talk to HOTS, correct? Yes. And he basically was playing peacemaker, correct? Yes. And that's really what is really big with him, being respectful and brotherhood, correct? Yes. And being organized and make sure there's no division, correct? Yes. And the visit that you had with him on March 11th of 2016, That also lasted several hours, didn't it? Yes. And you also mentioned Polo. Did you know Polo? I never knew him personally. I know his name. So you never spoke to him? No. And you also mentioned James Baxton's wife, you referred to as GL. Yes. Did you ever meet her in person? No, I did not. Okay. And you all never spoke about any kind of fraud scams or anything during visitation, is that correct? No. I don't have anything further, Your Honor.